What's up? I'm the serial plagiarist. I was just done copy-pasting 3 different science fiction films from my upcoming movie. Don't tell anybody. So a while ago, I read, or rather listened to, Darth Bane, Path of Destruction, the first third of the Darth Bane Trilogy. Darth Bane was a character conceptualized by none other than George Lucas in his treatments for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The main thing that's noteworthy is that he is the creator of the Rule of Two that the Sith of the prequel trilogy abide by. He was first canonically mentioned in the novelization for said movie. Since Darth Bane is lacking a mainstream appearance aside from, well, you know, many people don't know that much about Darth Bane and who he was beyond the Rule of Two creator. Because just like a lot of things, TCW will give you a very skewed look at what it cherry picks from the expanded universe. I had moderate expectations for this book, and then I read it, and I was blown away by how intense the whole thing was. This actually might be my favorite Star Wars novel thus far. I liked it even more than the Thrawn trilogy. That is some high praise right there, as those books were oh so well written, but Darth Bane has the advantage of feeling more focused, if that makes sense. It's also way easier to keep track of, since the Thrawn trilogy felt like so much was happening, and it was hard to sink it all in. In this story, not much happens on the larger scale directly, but the story in question is very important to the entire Star Wars timeline. It signals the end of the Old Republic era, and man does it go out with a bang. Endless wars between the Jedi and the Sith come to a close. This novel was written by Drew Karpyshyn, who of course was lead writer on one of my favorite games, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Writing a novel is a lot different than writing a role-playing video game, but the transition in quality is seamless. Just like my original KOTOR playthrough, I was desperate to keep hearing it to the end. Also, this video is mainly about Darth Bane Path of Destruction, but I intend to cover the Jedi vs. Sith comic too, released before Path of Destruction, as the novel's climax and the comic coincide with each other, and my buddy Iron Inquisitor recommended I read it after Path of Destruction, so I did. I didn't enjoy the comic as much as I did Path of Destruction, and to be honest, it feels like a companion piece, even though Path of Destruction came out years after. Still though, the significance of the comic probably wasn't important until Path of Destruction came out. Because since the comic takes place in the climax, it feels like there's a lot of backstory missing, even though it wasn't conceptualized at the time. Also, there are a few continuity errors between Path of Destruction and Jedi vs. Sith, but Path of Destruction does reference events from Jedi vs. Sith directly, so it isn't like they forgot it existed. It's just that lining the two up together got jarbled, and they handled it infinitely better than Disney ever will. So with all that context, let's get into it. I'm going to be honest, the very beginning was a huge turnoff. All it did was introduce a new Sith faction, the Brotherhood of Darkness, recapturing Korriban and their de facto leader, Lord Khan, doing a monologue about how they have reclaimed Korriban, homeworld of the Sith, and that they will restore the Sith to glory. It's basically all that "I will rule the world" stuff that the stereotypical villain always says. I was like, is that it when it came to the prologue? But afterwards, my impressions were flipped on its head. We're introduced to a young man named Dessel, a cortosis miner born into the crappy lifestyle. It's established that Dessel was the son of a guy named Hurst, and that his mother died in childbirth, leading to Hurst greatly resenting his son and violently abusing him physically whenever he got angry enough. Eventually, one day his father died from a heart attack, but unfortunately, the massive debt he got was passed on to Dessel, leading to Dessel being stuck working in the Cortosis mines, trying to cover a debt he would never be able to pay for. The first chapter starts with Dessel 5 years after his father's death, working the mines. Dessel has been working a 6-hour shift, and the book does a great job at building atmosphere to dark, unsanitary mines, and describing how hard Dessel has been working for the entire day. Anyways, another minor, Gerd, who was at one point friends with Hurst before his death, and a fellow abuser, is flat out drunk on Corellian whiskey. Given how he tells Dessel to move out of the way on some minerals when Dessel's equipment starts to falter. Dessel absolutely refuses to satisfy this dick. And Gerd goes on about how Dessel doesn't respect his father by never referring to him as Dad. Then out of drunken rage, Gerd attacks Dessel, and Dessel, with all his strength, manages to get the upper hand on Gerd, but soon afterwards collapses down from exhaustion. Gerd thinks he's got the advantage now that Dessel has no energy. He plans to gorge out one of his eyes with his thumb and blind him, but on Dessel's side, he receives a premonition, a feeling he gets occasionally, which he learns to never ignore. With his precognition, he manages to predict where Gerd will hit and catches Gerd's thumb with his teeth and bites it off. Jesus. When I heard this in the audiobook, I was shocked. I was like, whoa, slow down there, Drew. It's only chapter 1. And that was a good thing. The pure shock from how the story starts pushes out the adrenaline instantly, and also, you're happy that Dessel won this fight. Speaking of Dessel, he decides to leave the mines, having his pay for the day revoked, but he didn't care. That usually happens when a fight breaks out. Given his exhaustion, he decides to go back to the colony. He takes a transport back, but before deciding to go to the barracks to sleep, he thought, maybe I should go to the local cantina. So he heads there instead. There we are introduced to Groshik, the Neimoidian cantina owner. It's explained that Groshik had a loose friendship with Dessel. Then they had mutual agreements set up. Like if Dessel was poured a drink without asking for it, he'd get it for free. Groshik is the most likable Neimoidian in Star Wars I've ever seen. Yet he still characterizes his species, in terms of him thinking about business and all that other stuff, but he isn't insanely greedy. And no, the Neimoidians aren't racist stereotypes. Basically, Dessel notices a group of Republic officers, and Groshik tells him that the Republic's here to collect the cortosis. They're playing sabacc with local miners and such. Dessel knows right off the bat that they're mostly here to try and recruit naive miners into becoming a soldier for the ongoing war against the Sith. This book does a great job at giving a feeling of pessimistic disdain Dessel has for the Republic. Living on an Outer Rim planet, he sees the Republic as an overbloated bureaucracy, and many others in his area feel the same. It's reinforcing what was set up in the prequel trilogy. People with less than ideal lives don't like the Republic. Dessel decides to approach the Republic officers, who are playing sabacc against other miners. When the table becomes free, Dessel decides to play sabacc with them. The novel surprised me when it comes to the commentary on the war against the Sith. Right off the bat, the Republic officers automatically want to recruit Dessel, and he doesn't fall for it. During the sabacc game, the two parties talk about the war, and in their efforts to recruit Dessel, talk about Sith atrocities. The way Dessel sees it, they're fighting a war and casualties are gonna happen. The way it's presented, Dessel of course doesn't understand the true implications of the Sith winning. Like most people throughout history and even now, many cannot see the bigger picture. Sometimes what matters is what's happening in the moment, and that's really interesting. Playing Knights of the Old Republic, the perception we're given, the Sith are irrefutably evil, but from the perspective of someone on a dirt-poor Outer Rim planet that the Republic exploits heavily, they might not be able to see what is so wrong with the Sith. Dessel just tells them, the Sith are people, just like you are, and soon afterwards the politics discussion stops. With that being said, they continue the game. Dessel plays against a Republic ensign who, in the audiobook, sounded exactly like a southern redneck. And how appropriate, given this guy is a douchebag. When I was watching Solo, with Han and Lando playing sabacc, there was no tension. The way it was presented, it was a casual game the first time, and the second time, it was a quota to fulfill to get the Millennium Falcon, and that was it. Here, it's done far better. The sabacc game is gripping, as Dessel loses a game, and the douchebag ensign rubs it in his face. Dessel, determined to teach the douchebag a lesson, as the game becomes less about the game itself, and more about teaching that ensign a lesson, and you're right alongside Dessel, as he's determined to wipe the smile off his face. Through the Force subconsciously, he manages to incite anger in the game, and manages to win against the Republic ensign, causing him to go absolutely ballistic. He accuses Dessel of cheating and goes on a delusional, rage-filled rant about how the Republic protects them and that his homeworld of Apatros is ungrateful. Before the situation turns into violence, Groshek shoots a blaster up in the air and orders everyone out except Dessel. Dessel helps Groshek clean up, and from there, Groshek tells him about his strange ability to incite anger in the douchebag ensign. After a while, he lets Dessel go. On his way to the barracks to get some sleep, Dessel is attacked by none other than the douchebag and friends. In the pitch-black darkness, Dessel gets another premonition and deflects the vibroblade and kills the ensign in self-defense. His buddies flee to presumably tell their commanding officer a falsified story about how Dessel attacked them. Dessel, of course, realizes he's in deep trouble, even if it wasn't his fault, and returns to Groshek's cantina. After recounting what happened, Groshek reveals that he has contacts in both the Republic and the Sith. The Republic contacts aren't going to do much good in this situation, so he straight up asks Dessel a question. Did he mean what he said about the Sith? Dessel, after some thought, says yes, and Groshek offers him an alternative to being arrested. He can be smuggled off-world and join the Sith army, and fight the Republic. Dessel accepts, and Groshek, before Dessel leaves Apatros for good, gives him some words of inspiration. Don't count on others for help. In the end, each of us is in this alone. The survivors are those who know how to look out for themselves. Dessel escapes his homeworld, and his troubles are behind him, mostly. So basically, to sum all that up, the Republic tried to recruit Dessel into becoming a Republic soldier, and when that doesn't work, they're dicks to him and tries to kill him after he wins the Sabacc game, leading into the ensign being killed himself, and Dessel becomes a Sith soldier instead. That is a case of irony so thick you could cut it with a knife. Out of this whole ordeal, I'd be surprised if the Republic didn't recruit more Sith troopers than actual troopers intended to join them. Well, from here, Dessel becomes a fine soldier for the Sith. The Sith respect strength, and Dessel had proven himself a competent and effective soldier time and time again over the following year. They managed to present the Sith army in a way that's likable, yet showing us hints that they're still the Sith after all. Dessel is part of a unit known as the Gloomwalkers that has an impressive track record as an effective fighting force. Throughout the course of a year, Dessel warms up to the life of a soldier and makes some friends along the way. Dessel fights many offensives and is pretty much the John Connor of the Gloomwalkers, as his efforts earn his unit many victories, but he's not calling the shots. Instead, some douchebag named Ulabor is giving orders. Despite taking all the credit, he did promote Dessel to sergeant as compensation for the credit. Remember when I said we still got a taste of the Sith being Sith? Yeah, well, during the Battle of Asira, the Gloomwalkers are obligated to take over a Republic outpost. Ulabor is given a deadline to take that outpost, and that deadline is extremely tight. So he orders the Gloomwalkers to attack during the day, to the dismay of the entire unit. Pretty much everyone hates the idea, and Dessel of course realizes that Ulabor is under pressure to take the outpost by a certain time, or face consequences from his superiors at the Brotherhood of Darkness. He takes matters into his own hands, knocks the shit out of Ulabor, and takes control of the unit and intends to take the outpost at night. When night falls, the Gloomwalkers move in, avoiding detection, but of course they are now outmatched by Republic forces. The book certainly made tensions high around here, as the Republic has the upper hand, and Dessel, frustrated as all hell, charges in single-handedly, and another precognition happens, allowing him to use Deadeye on over a dozen Republic soldiers. The book shows us how, to his surprise, he manages to quick-shot that amount of soldiers in the course of a few seconds. The outpost falls, and victory is within the Sith's grasp. But then, speak of the devil, Ulabor shows up, slaps some cuffs on Dessel, and has him thrown away in prison for mutiny. At this point, we could probably see where this is going. Dessel, despite saving most of the Gloomwalkers, is expected to be court-martialed, but in comes a dude named Lord Kopej, a Twi'lek Sith Lord who comes to the story and informs Dessel that he's Force sensitive. The incredible feats he's responsible for is the result of his incredible connection to the Force, and tells him that despite his natural power, it is nothing to what he can accomplish with training. This is what I've been saying over and over again. The Force is not something you magically believe in to get all the powers. You train hard at it to get everything. I doubt any of the Disney shills will be watching this, but this is the confirmation. This shit is George Lucas canon too. Anyways, Karpyshyn gives Dessel the offer to train as a Sith on Korriban, and he accepts. This is where his new name comes in. Dessel thinks to what his abusive, piece of shit father always called him. The bane of his existence. And that's what he adopts as his new identity. Bane of the Sith. With that, the entire middle act of the book is Bane training at the Academy, with a couple of outside perspectives to tell the reader what's going on outside of Korriban. An interesting fact about the Brotherhood of Darkness, none of them use the Darth title. It's mostly just Lord whatever. While not revealed why until later on, it makes for an interesting gimmick at this point in the story. Bane, with his exceptional power, begins to outclass students who have been at it for years. At first he looks to the archives, studying ancient Sith history and whatnot, until being told that he should be practicing and combat and such, so he does. In a training session, he duels one of his rivals, a Markuth called Forar. Can't remember how it was pronounced exactly, but point is, they hate each other. During the duel, Forar manages to get the upper hand on Bane and takes his time gloating and taunting him, and man did he choose the wrong time, as Bane unleashes his rage on this guy and flat out murders him. At the Academy, competitive violence is encouraged among students, but there is one irredeemable sin:
getting caught.
Well, right here, Bane just killed a student in front of everyone. But Bane, to his surprise, isn't punished. The headmaster Cordis instead is impressed by his potential and lets him off the hook. The Sith, ladies and gents, not caring a single bit about the lives of their own. Selfish desires overtake all. But being left off the hook and continuing his training is short-lived, however, as shortly after, Bane realizes something in his sleep. We get his flashback to when his father died. We get a glimpse at the overly abusive, pitiful excuse for a father that Bane has. When he was still Dessel, he was minding his own business, eating his food. His piece of shit father berates him, telling him that he worked hard to get that food and it's not all for him. One of my few criticisms is, despite the effective hatred for this character, he is a bit stereotypically abusive. What I mean is, parental abuse is a lot more subtle than this. It isn't always as harsh as portrayed in movies. I kind of feel this book was going over the top, but in context, they say that Bane's father blames all of his problems on his son, and is pretty much his twisted punching bag. Dessel decides to finally talk back to his father, telling him he works just as hard as he does in the mines. His father inevitably gets pissed off and grabs him, and Dessel tells him to enjoy the last beating he's about to give him. It will be the last time he gets to do it. His piece of shit father viciously beats him, giving him 2 black eyes and breaking most of his bones. Later that night, Bane in his bed swears that his father will die tonight. Through the flashback, Bane in the present realized that he killed his father. He unknowingly inflicted a heart attack that killed his father. Man, what a twist. It seems at this point that killing your father, or at least the idea of it, is a common trope in Star Wars, and this is the very best example. At the very bottom, you've got incest child killing his fake dad, and at the top, we've got Bane flat out murdering his father subconsciously through the Force, before he could even unlock his potential. This twist also affects the story, as this revelation weakens Bane. Now that's what you call great writing. He begins to fear his power, and it greatly hinders him during his training. On top of this, his rival, a Zabrak named Sirak, is surpassing him. Sirak has no personal issues that drag him down, so Bane realizes that if he wants to earn that sweet, sweet prestige back, that he must take Sirak head on in a 1v1. He realizes that taking on any other student would be a sign of weakness, and so, Challenging Sirac, he overcomes the odds and I'm just kidding, Bane loses terribly, having all of his bones broken and some even shattered. The stakes were losing for great, as afterwards he is shunned by the Sith as a whole. He is outright banned from further training. He's done. The most he can do now is look at the archives and that's it. Damn, this sequence was agonizing. You can tell Bane screwed up big time and paid the price. Knowing that Bane will become one of the most influential Sith, the story effectively gives the impression that he's done. He had potential, but he's not worthy anymore. The Masters have forgotten about him, and that's the end of that. But of course, this is not the end. Bane must figure out a way to reclaim his former glory. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you see it, there's an introduction of a new character. During the Ruusan campaign, the top dogs at the Brotherhood of Darkness get some info from a defector, a traitor of the Jedi named Githany. Githany is described as an attractive 10 out of 10 would bang again material, if she'd let you bang at least once. To be honest, the novel is a bit excessive with her description, but I understand Karpyshyn needed to hammer the point across. As such, her intel gains the Sith a victory at Ruusan, and she's inducted as a student on Korriban. Githany is basically the popular girl at high school. She makes all the male students lust for her, and all the female students jealous. How does this woman get involved with a loser like Bane, who lost all his glory and prestige and whatnot? Well, as it turns out, since Sirac is her main rival, and the only one that she needs to take out, and the fact that Bane lost to him, she figures she needs to find out how not to lose and avoid making the same mistakes as Bane. So she literally just seduces him, and Bane, being the gutless simp that he is, falls in love with her immediately. Githany practically gets really close to him, and they agree on a deal. Githany will teach him what she learns from the Masters, and Bane will give her insight into his loss against Sirac. Once she leaves and is out of sight, the book emphasizes how distracting she is. Bane decides that he will be the one to defeat Sirac, not her. She's a means to an end, despite simping for her. So he literally goes to the lightsaber combat instructor Kazim and asks him to train him. Kazim, of course, is reluctant, but Bane convinces him that they'll do it in secret. If he regains his prestige, he gets the credit for training Bane, and if he cannot, nobody will know about it. So with that, we cue the classic Rocky training montage, with Bane having two teachers, Githany for the Force and Kazim for combat. Bane quickly regains his connection to the dark side of the Force, and Githany realizes she made a big mistake agreeing to teach Bane. Bane manages to take on Sirac again and humiliates him, sending him to the medical wing, and he proves to himself and the other students,
I'm back.
On top of that, Kazim rewards him with a gift, his own lightsaber. Woo! Shortly after, Cordus, the head of the academy, goes to speak to Bane, and it's here where Bane starts having a falling out with the Brotherhood of Darkness. Bane realizes that the Brotherhood of Darkness are a bastardization of what the Sith are, and decides that he's going to the Valley of the Dark Lords, and seeing if he can find something there, and ignores Cordus when he says that everything there has been picked clean centuries ago. Bane decides to go on a hike there, and he finds squat. After a while of searching, he doesn't find anything, so he has to walk all the way back. The book does give some nuances on controlling hunger and dehydration with the Force, that you can restrain it, but you can't stop it. Only question I have is, what Darth Sion ate for breakfast. Bane then realized why he couldn't find anything. The Sith Lords of old had zero interest in the pretenders of the Brotherhood of Darkness. This is around here where you can tell that the rule of two is starting to kickstart in Darth Bane's mind. After refreshing his batteries essentially, he has a confrontation with Githany, Sirac, and his goons. It's here where Bane fully utilizes the dark side, as Githany then betrays Sirac, kills his goons, and Bane overpowers Sirac and has him at his mercy. In his last moments, Sirac begs for mercy, and in one of the coolest lines in this novel, Bane is like, "Those who ask for mercy do not deserve it." And then Bane goes to Cordus and fucking berates the Brotherhood of Darkness for being fake-ass cowards, and how the Sith of old would be ashamed of them. While everyone is getting ready for the Battle of Ruusan, Bane tells them to go screw themselves. He's going somewhere else. This is where Bane's study of history really comes full circle. He's going to the unknown world from KOTOR. It's here where Drew Karpyshyn is just flattering himself, with fan service up the arse. As KOTOR's main writer, he gives all the context we know and love from the game. He elaborates that the Rakata have since gone extinct, and the Starforge destroyed long beforehand. He hikes and travels to the Temple of the Ancients, and the description of the temple is dead set accurate to how it was in the game. He searches around for any relics of the past, and he finds it. The holocron created by the one, the only, Darth Revan, one of the most powerful Sith Lords ever. Revan millennia ago imprinted his personality into the holocron. Over the course of weeks, Bane learns the history of the Sith and the dark side, and learns more than what the Brotherhood of Darkness ever taught him, or anyone, further reinforcing his belief that the Brotherhood of Darkness suck and should die. But unlike Jake Skywalker, he's going to make the Sith something better, instead of just being a grouchy, pathetic loser. With the inspiration from Revan's holocron, he decides that he's going to create the rule of two, as the holocron of Revan taught him that having multiple Sith apprentices was foolish. Kazim comes in, tries to stop Bane, but with the advantage of the layout of the temple, Bane gets the upper hand on Kazim, and now it's time for Bane to enact his dark plan for the survival of the Sith, killing all of those fake Sith and leaving him the sole survivor so he can make the rule of two a reality. He ruled out Kazim as an apprentice for his blind loyalty to Lord Khan, and now that he's dead, he won't be of much use. What about Githany? She's a good enough candidate, Bane thought. I'd also like to mention that Bane and Githany grew close, with Githany telling him earlier in the novel that the reason she left the Jedi Order was because she was caught having a relationship with her fellow Padawan Kyo-Chani with their mutual master. She offered her boyfriend, I'll essentially call him, to join her in defecting the Sith, but he refused, and their ties were cut. This scene in the novel, I can't quite remember when it happened in the structure of the novel, but this is where Githany starts to realise that she too has feelings for Bane. Well anyways, Bane contacts the Brotherhood of Darkness, telling him that he's on Ambria and he wants to return to the Brotherhood. Of course, Githany offers to kill off Bane as a threat, and Khan accepts. So Bane and Githany reunite and share a passionate kiss. Bane realizes she put poison all over her lips, but underestimates the poison use. He realizes that Githany believes too much in the Brotherhood of Darkness to become his apprentice, so he rules her out as his apprentice. When Githany leaves, the poison kicks in and he's screwed unless he gets the antidote. The draw to the dark side on the world is too weak, so he collapses. But when a father and his sons happen to stumble by him, he seizes the opportunity, killing the boys and feeding off the fear and grief of the father. It's here where we see that Bane is truly evil by this point. He kills this family in cold blood and benefits himself only. That is the way of the Sith. You can feel that Darth Bane was irrefutably in the wrong, but he doesn't care. You were with him at the start when he killed the Republic officers in self-defense, but now, he's cold and heartless now. No empathy to be seen. He makes it to a healer named Caleb and demands he help heal him. Caleb refuses, but then Bane uses his daughter as a bargaining chip, and so Caleb is forced to heal him. Bane ends up sparing Caleb, figuring he might need him later. Anyways, with that being said, Bane has the ultimate weapon for taking out the Brotherhood of Darkness, the Thought Bomb. To be honest, this is quite an unintimidating name, but the Thought Bomb was introduced in Jedi vs. Sith, not Path of Destruction. Bane introduces the Thought Bomb to the Brotherhood of Darkness on Ruusan, something he learned from the holocron of Revan. Throughout the course of the climax, Bane outsmarts the Brotherhood of Darkness, giving them the Thought Bomb and tricking them into thinking they'll be able to survive it. Around this time, the Army of Light, led by Jedi General Lord Hoth, are closing in on the Brotherhood. The Battle of Ruusan, it seems, has extremely high stakes for the Sith. The Sith will be wiped out forever if the Jedi manage to destroy all of them. Knowing that it's all or nothing, Hoth goes in, knowing that he will probably die, but is determined to destroy the Sith. It's actually quite a beautiful scene, with Hoth believing that countless wars against the Sith are behind them, and that peace can finally become a possibility. This is also quite sad, because we know where this leads 1,000 years down the line. He orders most of the Jedi to evacuate Ruusan and takes a legion of Jedi with him into the cave the Brotherhood of Darkness are hiding out on. Confronted by the Army of Light, Khan activates the Thought Bomb, a weapon designed to kill all Force sensitives in range, not just the Jedi. All the Force users in range are caught by the power of the Thought Bomb and are vaporized. Khan dies, Hoth dies, and Githany? Well, let's just say she was affected by the Thought Bomb too. Jedi vs. Sith elaborates some more on what she was doing during the battle. She was forced to fight her ex-boyfriend Kil-Chani and convinced the Jedi Padawan, Daravit, to betray the Jedi. Daravit was a character who came to Ruusan with his 3 cousins, including... well, we'll get to that. This is where I talk about Jedi vs. Sith. The comic was something that I didn't enjoy that much. Reading this after Path of Destruction, I felt this comic was okay in quality, an easy 6 out of 10. The art style was kind of weird, and the subplot between the cousins, including Daravit, Hardin, Root, and of course Rain, was a little uninteresting. I preferred Path of Destruction. There are a few contradictions between the comic and the novel, but you can tell that Drew Karpyshyn knew about the comic, but just wasn't 100% accurate to it. For my headcanon, most of Darth Bane Path of Destruction happened, while some of the stuff in Jedi vs. Sith happened, but the more important events are overruled by Path of Destruction in my opinion. The expanded universe did have contradictions, and this is one of them, but this is easily forgivable for being a rare occasion, because Disney canon overwrites itself all the time without filling in the gaps. Anyways, in the Jedi vs. Sith comic, one of the main characters, Rain, splits off from her cousins and befriends a fluffy creature known as La. The comic is kind of weird when it comes to a lot of stuff, so the design was off-putting and non-Star Warsian, but anyways, Rain befriends La. La predicts that in the future, Rain will become a Dark Jedi because again, this comic is really weird, and basically the comic develops a friendship between the two. Anyways, shortly after the Thought Bomb goes off, and the planet is blown off a lot of the greenness it once had, the Bouncers, La's species starts going into madness, and starts howling messages through the Force about pain and destruction or something. This causes the Army of Light to end their suffering. When 2 Jedi Knights find Rain riding La, they kill La, throwing Rain off. Rain, realizing that her friend is dead, unwittingly uses the dark side of the Force to snap the necks of both Jedi, returning to her friend and crying uncontrollably for her. These strong emotions attract none other than Darth Bane, the sole surviving Sith, who was kilometers away from the Thought Bomb when it went off. He discovers Rain in her sorrow state. This here is Bane's new apprentice. Bane senses the Force within Rain and adopts her with her birth name, Xana, hence closing the book with Zane getting rid of the Brotherhood of Darkness and recruiting a young and powerful apprentice at the same time. Daravit later shows up and tries to kill Bane, but Xana just uses the Force to blow up his weapon, and spares him when she tells her new master Bane that there would be nothing to gain in killing him. In Jedi vs. Sith, we also see that Githany was caught by the Thought Bomb. Due to conflicting events, she was caught either because she was lost in the caves, or because Daravit slowed her down. Either way, in the comic, Githany approaches Bane, realizing he was right but too little too late, as she crumbles into dust and is nothing more than a hollow corpse. Perhaps Bane's greatest triumph is looking at the skull of the woman he once simped over, and is like, nah. And that was Darth Bane Path of Destruction. To be honest, I feel that despite the mitigated quality of Jedi vs. Sith, both stories should be read in unison with each other. I feel like that's fair. This was mostly a review of the Path of Destruction novel, but I didn't feel like reviewing Jedi vs. Sith separately. So there's my thoughts on the comic out of the way. Path of Destruction may be my favourite novel thus far. The personal journey of Darth Bane from poor miner to sole surviving Sith is a really interesting one, and damn was the ending just bleak. In case it didn't sink in, pretty much every major character from the novel died except Bane. Bane made it out unscathed because he outsmarted everyone. He earned that victory. It wasn't like Reva, the third sister, who came up with a shitty plan that worked in her favor because plot. Nah. Bane organically came up with a clever plan and executed it. And it wasn't like it went off perfectly. Bane had to persist through many factors, but in the end, he won. He got his way, and now he and he alone decides the fate of the Sith. He is the chosen one. The one who would destroy the Sith and make them stronger. He will destroy the Jedi and leave them in tatters. Despite the fact that his story is far from over, Path of Destruction ended in a satisfying way. It was dark as hell. From Bane's perspective, this is not the end. This is the beginning of the end for the Jedi. To be honest, I wasn't expecting Path of Destruction to be that good. I expected it to be on the same level as Darth Plagueis, but this novel surpassed everything I read so far. The Thrawn Trilogy was great, but could not compare to the sheer brilliance of Darth Bane. Granted, the Thrawn Trilogy was more of an adventure story, while Darth Bane is more of a personal journey. Darth Bane surprised me. Great protagonist, great story, great writing, great presentation, and certainly worth reading or listening to. I might actually give Darth Bane the same level as Revenge of the Sith. That is some high praise right there. This story reminded me of the prequel trilogy a lot. This story only suffers from minimal problems that are as small as possible. As mentioned before, I didn't like the prologue, which was essentially Lord Khan being like, "We will rule the galaxy because we're evil," and that was it. Darth Bane undergoes a massive transformation, first from a poor miner, abused by his father, to the ultimate Sith Lord. The Brotherhood of Darkness bans the Darth title because Lord Khan felt it promoted infighting. Perhaps part of the reason Bane chose to adopt the Rule of Two, so maybe his time at the Sith Academy wasn't completely useless. This has been quite the story. I cannot recommend it enough. I pretty much spoiled the whole thing, but the summary of my thoughts are basically, great book. Sorry that you guys voted for Dark Empire first, but I just happened to finish my Darth Bane review before Dark Empire. With that being said, that is my review of Darth Bane, Path of Destruction. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stores for mystery boxes?
Water was running.